So let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something that affects literally every single one of us who works. But, it's almost never talked about. We're looking at the hidden evolution of our workplace friendships as we get older. I mean, you spend decades with your coworkers. You share your daily life with them. But what actually happens to those relationships when retirement starts looming on the horizon? Well, let's get into it and uncover the psychology of aging at work. To really understand the workplace, we first have to look at the world outside of it. And frankly, making friends as an adult is incredibly tough. Recent data shows we're actually in an adult friendship recession. A staggering half of all adults didn't make a single new friend last year. Half. Let that sink in for a second. When our social circles outside the office shrink or just kind of stagnate, the relationships we build inside the office suddenly take on a massive amount of weight in our lives. And this brings up a timeless truth, captured perfectly by Muhammad Ali. He said, "Friendship is the hardest thing in the world to explain. It's not something you learn in school, but if you haven't learned the meaning of friendship, you really haven't learned anything." Because adult friendships are so scarce nowadays, the workplace naturally transforms into this deeply meaningful hub for human connection. We rely on these people not just to hit deadlines, but for emotional support, trust, and honestly, our own psychological well-being. All right, moving on to Section 1, the scientific paradox. So there's this major 2025 organizational psychology study looking at about 900 older UK employees, and it reveals a complete split in the scientific literature. For years, researchers have been totally divided. Some studies firmly show that as we age, we actually make more workplace friends and deepen our bonds. But then, other studies insist on the exact opposite, that aging equals fewer workplace friends, with people checking out and distancing themselves. How can both be true? How can aging simultaneously build bridges and burn them? Well, that is the exact mystery we're decoding today. Which brings us to Section 2, the time perception shift. To solve this paradox, we have to rethink what getting older actually means. Age isn't just some biological number. It triggers a profound psychological shift in how we perceive our own timelines. The crucial concept here is occupational future time perspective. Basically, this is your subjective experience of the time and opportunities you have left before you retire. Think of it like a melting clock. When you're in your 20s, you look at the time since you started working, and the horizon feels infinite. But as you age, you stop looking back, and you start counting the shrinking time left until you leave the workforce forever. Your timeline completely flips. And this shrinking clock changes absolutely everything about how you act at work. Let's look at how that plays out in Section 3, the path of connection. This ticking clock forces our brains down a psychological fork in the road. And the first route you can take is a highly positive one. It's driven by something researchers call socio-emotional selectivity theory. Sounds like a mouthful, right? But the concept is actually beautiful. It means that as your occupational time runs out, your motivations shift away from future-oriented goals, like, chasing a promotion or aggressively networking, toward goals in the here and now. Instead of investing in some distant career milestone, you suddenly crave immediate emotional intimacy, deep trust, and meaningful interactions with the people right around you. In the real world, this theory translates into very specific here and now behaviors. If you go down this path of connection, you start going to those after-work social events you might have skipped in your 30s. You drop by coworkers' desks just to chat. You start opening up about private matters and actively seeking emotional support. You are essentially soaking up the socio-emotional meaning of your remaining time by investing heavily in the people you work with, right before you retire. But there is another way, Section 4, the path of disengagement. Remember that paradox we talked about earlier? Not everyone takes the path of connection. On the flip side, we have disengagement theory. This is the alternate, somewhat darker branch of our psychological fork in the road. It's a pre-retirement process where, instead of seeking connection, an older worker reacts to their shrinking timeline by basically mentally checking out. They're psychologically preparing for a new life without work by intentionally reducing their work activities, their investments, and their motivation. It's a self-imposed withdrawal from the daily grind. What's really fascinating here is the domino effect. When you start letting go of work tasks, it naturally bleeds right into letting go of the people at work. These withdrawal behaviors, they look like actively avoiding after-work drinks, keeping conversations strictly formal, making up excuses to dodge coworkers in the hallway, and just focusing purely on getting the tasks done so you can clock out on time. The emotional walls go up as the worker prepares for their final exit. Let's look at the actual model from the 2025 study here, because it really puts the whole puzzle together for us. Notice how age feeds right into that occupational future time perspective in the middle, and from there, boom, the path splits. Both the positive socio-emotional path on the top and the negative disengagement path on the bottom are happening at the exact same time in the aging workforce. That is exactly why past researchers were so confused. Age triggers both a desire to connect and a desire to withdraw, completely depending on the person. So what's the tiebreaker? Section 5, the deciding factor. This begs the ultimate question. If both paths exist, what makes an employee go down the upper path of connection versus the lower path of withdrawal? Well, the researchers discovered an incredible boundary condition, which they call friendship-type preference. This simply means the value an employee places on their workplace friends relative to their non-work friends. It all comes down to where you get your primary social identity. Basically, is your true inner circle inside the office or is it outside of it? And this preference has a massive impact. As we can see from the dotted lines here, for people who highly value their non-work friends, their late career disengagement dramatically accelerates as their occupational clock ticks down. You start pulling away from the office much faster because, honestly, you're eager to reallocate all your remaining time and energy to your friends back in your neighborhood or community. The office simply loses its social grip on you.
Finally, let's wrap this up in Section 6, Navigating the Future.
So, why does all of this matter to you and your workplace? Let's bring this science back to the real world. Organizations simply cannot afford to ignore these invisible psychological paths. The stakes are just too high. First off, keeping older workers socially engaged prevents a massive brain drain. If they disengage too early, decades of institutional memory just walk out the door in silence. Second, those social bonds literally ward off the severe health risks of isolation that often hit right after retirement. Organizations really need to actively build retiree and employee networks, and HR departments have to recognize that not everyone socializes the same way. Keeping older workers engaged isn't just some nice perk. It's absolutely vital for business survival and for human well-being. Ultimately, all of this builds to a very personal conclusion. Because here's the thing, that psychological fork in the road, it's waiting for all of us. Aging is a universal experience. Every single one of us exploring this explainer today will eventually face our own shrinking occupational clock. The only real question is how we're going to react to it when the time comes. Which leads me to leave you with this final thought. As your own occupational clock ticks down, who's going to be in your inner circle? Are you going to lean in, share your wisdom, and deeply cherish those final office coffee breaks? Or will you build a wall and focus purely on the exit? It's a choice that defines not just your final years at work, but the very beginning of your life after it. Something to think about.